What's striking about the events of the last few days is how the political landscape appears to be shifting. We've seen statements from former presidents, notably George W. Bush, acknowledging systemic racism, and we heard from President Obama urging Americans to make real change. Most shockingly, a rebuke for the current president from James Mattis, former Secretary of Defense and a man with an illustrious military career before his short-lived political one. In what can only be described as a serious condemnation, Mr. Mattis told Atlantic magazine that the president is trying to turn Americans against one another. We have voiced up part of what he wrote.
When I joined the military some 50 years ago, I swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution. Never did I dream that troops taking the same oath would be ordered under any circumstance to violate the constitutional rights of their fellow citizens, much less to provide a bizarre photo op for the elected commander-in-chief with military leadership standing alongside. We must reject any thinking of our cities as battle space that our uniformed military is called upon to dominate. At home, we should use our military only when requested to do so, on very rare occasions, by state governors. Militarizing our response, as we witness in Washington, D.C., sets up a conflict, a false conflict, between the military and civilian society. It erodes the moral ground that ensures a trusted bond between men and women in uniform and the society they are sworn to protect, and of which they themselves are a part.
The words of James Mattis. Well, we'll speak to prominent historian David Blight in a moment. Let's deal with the military aspect first with Daniel Davis, senior fellow and military expert at the Defence Priorities think tank and a retired lieutenant colonel in the US Army. Welcome to the programme. What did you make of General Mattis's remarks?
Yeah, well, I certainly have to agree with the mentality that he was talking about. And I think the key part there is the militarization aspect. I mean, you had too many people in the United States. I mean, you had Senator Tom Cotton in a New York Times editorial yesterday saying that one thing above all else we need to restore order to our streets, an overwhelming show of force to disperse, detain, and ultimately deter lawbreakers. That's not the language you want to use for the American civil population. The vast majority of these protesters are very valid and very peaceful, and that's not the message you want to send. But I'll tell you that this, in my view, is the consequence of our military-first foreign policy since 9/11, where we have become so accustomed to using lethal military force to solve any problem over there. Now it's seeped into domestic mentality, so that the first hint of problems, you want to bring in overwhelming force to compel Americans, and that's just not the right way to use it. It's not going to work.
And in your view, I mean, you cast it in the context of foreign policy, but as it may be applied, still, we don't know to what extent it may be applied beyond Washington, D.C. How dangerous is that idea then? Do you agree with James Mattis when he talks about the president attempting to divide Americans?
Well, that's certainly the net result, whatever his intent may be. And the thing about the military is if the things get completely out of hand and nobody can handle it, then it could be that in a last resort, you could potentially use military force. We've done it in limited cases in the past. But that needs to be the absolute last resort, because here's the thing. The active duty American military, they're trained to kill enemy troops. That National Guard troops are trained in crowd control, de-escalation. I mean, they're trained to do that. They are the ones that need to handle that at the direction of the state governors, not the Federal Reserve.
Okay, just tell me how widely you think that these views are shared inside the military leadership.
Oh, I think they're very broadly. In fact, I'd almost say uniformly, because you saw the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff issue a shocking memo yesterday to the other service chiefs.
This was Mark Milley.
Yes, this is Mark Milley. Yeah, he sent a note to all of the service chiefs to remind everybody that we're part of the American population, that we're there to serve them, to defend them according to the Constitution. I mean, that was a shocking, indirect rebuke in my view.
Daniel Davis, senior fellow and military expert at the Defence Priorities think tank, retired lieutenant colonel in the US Army. Thanks so much for joining us.